first come to you, Suhel Seth. When you look at these visuals, you hear the eyewitness account and you go through the details coming to fore, the first thing that happens is that a sense of fear grips you. And of course, then comes the analytical thinking and critical thinking. What is your assessment?
It is obviously a horrific accident. There's no denying that. It is an accident that no one imagined. And that's what accidents are, A. B. To my mind, having worked in the aviation business, I think everyone is becoming an aviation expert and jumping to conclusions. The two pilots who were in charge of the aircraft, one had over 8,000 hours of flying. The other, the first officer, had over 1,100 hours of flying. Three people or three stakeholders have to get involved in this. Number one, the aircraft manufacturer, which in this case is Boeing. Number two, the airline. And number three, the regulator. It is early, Swati. People are jumping to conclusions. Oh, this was not right. This was not right. You know, I'll tell you one thing. No company, no corporation, no airline wants anything of this kind to ever happen. It is heart-wrenching because people lose their lives. Families are orphaned. Families lose their loved ones. The regulators don't want this because it is a sign, it is a vote of non-confidence in India's aviation capabilities. The pilots of Air India, in every aviation survey, and you've got two experts here, you can ask them, including Anand, Air India pilots have been rated amongst the world's finest. So I'm amazed as to how people are jumping to multiple conclusions for no rhyme or reason. And then you have the Tata Group. You tell me, the Tata Group today is what, about 158 years old, has served the country with reverence, respect, and with diligence and commitment. You saw what happened post 26/11, Swati. Your channel covered it brilliantly. Ratan Tata was standing there right outside the Taj. They set up a fund, they set up a care facility. So my point is, rather than jump immediately to conclusions that this was wrong, that was wrong, this is not right, let's wait for an investigation to happen. This is not the time for fault finding. This is a time for, to my mind, consoling people who've lost their loved ones. This is a time for India to heal. This is not a time for India to accuse, not to be vituperative. You have very senior people involved in all of this. Cut them slack. Let them do their jobs. You know, airline accidents, this is not the first airline accident that has happened. There is a process to an accident. There's an inquiry based on the findings of the black box, based in partnership or in collaboration with the aircraft manufacturer. And then you come to those conclusions. That's what we have to wait for. People are jumping the gun. People are saying, oh, this happened. We think that happened. We don't think this was done, that was done. I mean, I'm amazed as to how in our country, when people need to come together to give solace to families, we are quick to find fault, get into an abusive situation for no rhyme or reason. There are multiple stakeholders involved here, and we must respect both their professionalism and their integrity. And this is not the time, to my mind, to cast repetitive accusations and fly around saying, oh, this was right, this was... Let me tell you, Swati, my wife and my 5.5-year-old child were taking off from Delhi for Kochi this evening when the news of this horrific accident happened. And you know what my wife said? And I salute her courage for that. She says, and when she landed, I spoke to her. She says, we had an excellent flight. And I have to tell you, the pilot and the crew were anguished as they were, but they served with diligence, with commitment, and with care. You know, amongst all the people on the panel, I traveled the most. I traveled 29 days a month. I know a thing or two about aircraft. And let me tell you, I'm not blowing smoke saying, oh, but Air India... The pilots of Air India, the crew of Air India as an airline, they are magnificent. Don't trash them. Don't say that, oh, you know, this is not right, that is not right.
Right.
You will then sully an entire ecosystem of great people, whether it's the crew, whether it's the engineers, whether it's the pilots. That's my initial submission.
I want to bring in Dr. Ranganathan. Dr. Ranganathan, like I said, earlier, first what happens is that a sense of grief and fear grips you, and then you start thinking, applying your brain, analyzing the situation, assessing what's transpired. I'm not saying that it's unsafe now, nobody's going to travel. Of course, we are going to do that, but everybody at this point of time on an individual level, perhaps recounting a similar situation if they've ever been into, recounting the worst tragedies that have happened in the history of aviation. Is this just that, an accident, and at the moment we should just wait for the black box to be recovered to get more details? Because the one question that nobody has an answer to and everybody is asking, what went wrong?
Good evening, Swati, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And at the outset, may I please offer my sincere condolences to the families of the bereaved. It really is a dark day for India and for all the affected families. And what can I say? It's truly a tragic day. Couple of points I'd like to make, and I'd like to thank Suhel for that wonderful bit that he spoke about over the last couple of minutes. Very important topic that he raised about the Air India pilots and how let us wait for the conclusions of the investigations that would happen, obviously, in the ensuing months. Couple of points. Number one, of course, Swati, as you very correctly said, it immediately happens as human proclivity after a crash. We believe that, flight is one of the least safest journeys to make. In fact, it is quite the opposite. The safest journey to make is through air. That has been proven. As far as this Dreamliner is concerned, of course, there have been issues with its safety. There was a whistleblower who said that there were issues with cost cutting, and there were things that especially related to hydraulics and whatnot. But the fact remains that there has never been a single Dreamliner crash. There has never been a single wide-body Dreamliner crash. This is the first wide-body crash of an Indian Airlines after 40 years. So it is exceedingly rare. That said, because it is exceedingly rare, it is absolutely paramount that we get to the bottom of it. Now, it's very clear, from the video that you've been running, and thank you for airing it, the plane crashed exactly 30 seconds after takeoff. Now, a sudden descent such as this, in fact, there was a Dreamliner that had a sudden descent about 14 months ago from Sydney to New Zealand, and it had a catastrophic consequence. Inside, many people were seriously injured. They're still investigating what caused that sudden descent. But, there could be several factors. Of course, the most common one is engine failures. I, as a common man, would never like to speculate what exactly it was.
Right.
But I think it is important for us to, as Suhel said, I'm not going to speculate or even talk about pilot error, because those two pilots were absolutely magnificent. They were highly trained, highly skilled. They had almost in total 10 to 11,000 hours of flying with them together. It wasn't possibly environmental factors. There was no severe weather that was reported, no wind shear, no cold, no turbulence, etc. Yes, there could be collision or external impact, a bird strike, many people say, but then it's rare. Drone collision, rare. Of course, I'm not conjecturing that. Structural failure, catastrophic damage to critical components, yes, you could say that. But I think what I would say as a layman is quite possibly a critical engine malfunction, but then again, there are two of those, right? So it would be exceedingly rare for both engines to fail. Perhaps a flame-out compressor stall or fuel supply issue, I don't know. But again, the strength of the explosion was because it was loaded with fuel, because it was a long-haul flight. But as Suhel said, and I echo with what you've said as well, investigators will get to the bottom of it. Today, India grieves, Swati, and it grieves terribly. It's a very tragic day.
Looking at that video, Air Vice Marshal Srivastav, 59 seconds, that's it. It was all done in 59 seconds. From the takeoff to the crash landing, just 59 seconds. But, in those 59 seconds, there are a lot of versions doing the round on social media, speculations happening on the position of the aircraft, on, what could have gone wrong. There are a lot of theories about tail heavy. I don't understand what tail heavy is. For the, you can throw more light on that.
Swati, firstly, I'm as grieved as anyone, and we are very sad. I've been in aviation for last 50 years, and I have done personally been involved with several aircraft accidents in various capacities. This is one of the most disastrous things we have seen. I agree with Suhel and I agree with Ranga that yes, this kind of thing has happened, and we need to take a deep breath and understand as to the people who are in aviation. They are highly, highly professional people. They don't do anything out of the book. They follow the book very strongly, and every procedure process is practiced and really taken care of. So what can go wrong? You talked about tail heavy. That means probably the CG was not at the right place where it should be. That's a conjecture. Unless we get into the FDR and get into CVR. CVR, I don't think hardly anything would be there because there was hardly any, except that just before the takeoff. Post takeoff, there was probably the communication which just said Mayday, 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 because there was hardly any time. So if you see when you take off, when you're taking it off or when you're landing, both are very critical phases. But when you're taking off, you are better prepared. You're supported by the ground staff. You're supported by the engineers. And before you take your brakes off and let the aircraft roll on the runway, you always see that everything is normal as it should be, because you got the responsibility of so many hundreds of passengers on your shoulders,
right,
and you're the one who's taking the aircraft into the air. So all checks, whether it's any kind of check, your instruments, your engine power, everything has been checked before you take the your pedal off and say, okay, let's roll. And after rolling, you just have some 30-40 seconds and it goes down. So whatever any one of us saying on in our private conversations or on TV channels, it's purely a conjecture. And there are several reasons. The reasons we normally classify in pilot error, which I will discount at this point of time. There's no, in my opinion, most unlikely reason is the pilot error. No, it didn't happen.
Okay.
There's no possibility of that. So that way we can say maintenance error or engineering error. So if we look at that, that also is rare, right? Because when you take over the aircraft and you fly it and it has come from Delhi, the first leg, you would know how the aircraft is behaving. And people posting pictures about air conditioning, posting picture infotainment,
right,
they are not at all connected with the safety or the flight pattern of the aircraft. That's not the way. We need our engines running. We need our power. The possibility that both the engines cease together because of bird ingestion or any kind of ingestion is also not there, because at this level, I don't think such big birds are there, because certain tolerances, the word tolerance is there in these engines they can take on. So that possibility, and both going together, both engines flaming out together, it's a rare, one of those rarest of rare things to happen. So now this question remains as to what went wrong.
Okay.
Did the aircraft stall completely because engines were not there, there's no power, and the pilot couldn't do anything? Or there was something else? We would need to wait and see how FDR will give you all moment to moment, everything. It will become clear what happened to engine, what happened to pilot, how it all went, and cockpit voice recorder will also be there. So I think as a nation or as a group of professionals, aviation experts, we need to wait for that, get into the depth of the matter, and then only go about speculation. There are many things. We all know what can go wrong, but let's hold our breath.
You agree with Suhel Seth and Dr. Ranganathan that let's not jump to conclusions. We have Gaurav Taneja on the broadcast as well. Very quickly, Gaurav Taneja, have you been able to wrap your head around the fact that it all happened within 59 seconds, that the takeoff takes place, of course, after clearance, after a go-ahead, and then a mayday call from the pilots?
Swati, first of all, very sad to hear this news. Actually, if you are taking off, the aircraft will show you the message if there is any severe error in the flight or on the systems, and it will ask you to reject the takeoff till there is, like, you have rotated the aircraft off the runway. So aircraft has taken off. That means there was no indication or warning from the aircraft itself. So the pilots continues. If there is any minor warning which does not affect the safety of the flight, takeoff is a critical phase, the aircraft systems inhibit that warning. And it says that, okay, let the pilots take off. This is not anything major. Let him reach a safe altitude of 4,000 or 5,000 feet. And then I will flash him this error so that pilot, if they want to, they can turn back and come and land safely at the departure airport. So there was no such warning at the takeoff. So that means there was no major error in the aircraft or the systems. Aircraft took off. Usually, Swati, anything regular, you just take off, you cross 100 feet or 400 feet, and you put the autopilot on. And in this case, I don't know whether the pilots had the time to do that. The landing gear was up. Usual procedure, you take off, you see there's a positive rate of flying. The other pilot calls that off and he takes the gear up. The gears were left down, indicating that right after takeoff, there was some emergency. The pilots were distracted. They were trying to solve that problem. There was no time or the call to take the landing gear up because there was no positive rate of flying. The aircraft was sitting down around 400 feet per minute. We have trained in the simulator. We have done so many exercises after takeoff, so many emergencies. We have never practiced a dual engine failure if it is after a takeoff. And once you're taking off from a city that is in the heart of the city, there are buildings in front of you. You can't do anything. If there is a desert or a plain farmland, I can still go and try to land the aircraft on that field, but there's buildings and there's houses and highways. What do? I have no training on that. I have been through such situations. The instructor simulates that just to tell the pilots how scary it can be. And at the end, the instructor freezes the sim. And we're like, thank God it's a sim. But what if it's a real aircraft? It's a pilot's nightmare. The both engines are not responding.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a stall because the angle of attack was not that high. It doesn't seem like a compressor stall as far as I can see, because in a compressor stall, you don't lose the entire power. So if you're taking off with 100 and this is 0, if you have a compressor stall, you still get 30% power, 40% power from the engine. The engine doesn't become dead. And if everything goes wrong, the aircraft is still certified to fly with one engine. At least it can circle and come back and land. So it is very unfortunate. Everybody is thinking what has gone wrong.
Absolutely.
Something we have never seen in the aviation industry.
That says a lot, that the experts of the field are shocked. The experts are saying this is an aircraft that has been described as uncrashable.